What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Frogs Up TCU Sports Podcast. I am Russ Hodges. That is Anthony North. We are back recording here this Sunday evening. Another road loss for the TCU football team, falling at Texas Tech 35-28 on Thursday, as the Frogs are now 1-4 on the road this season, 4-5 overall, and 2-4 in the Big 12 Conference this season. Now on life support, as the Frogs are going to have to win two of these last three games in order to get to a bowl, two of which are against Texas and Oklahoma. We will talk about this Texas Tech game, talk about what went wrong, what some of the positives were, and what TCU can do moving forward to just try and salvage something over these last few weeks. We'll hit on some of the other results in the Big 12, some huge games, a lot of close matchups over the weekend. We have some basketball preview content coming up. Both the men and the women are going to be tipping off the season tomorrow at Schollmeyer Arena. And we have some other TCU items to hit on later: soccer, men's tennis, volleyball, and some beach volleyball news. A couple fall seasons wrapping up here for beach volleyball and men's tennis. So, Anthony, how's your weekend been going so far?
Yeah, man, it's been one of the busiest weeks of the year. This week is always for me with Halloween, and then my youngest just had his third birthday, and my oldest has his birthday next week, turning 8. So it's a busy time in my house. Lots of fun stuff, but very much a lot of activity going on around here. We did have three soccer games this weekend as well. So the youth soccer season wraps up this week, which has been a really good time, but also is quite a lot of activity as well. So it's been super busy, but weather was perfect here in Fort Worth, and it's been a fun time. I got to go out. We'll talk about it later, but I got to go out to one of the volleyball games on Saturday. So yeah, it's been a good time. How about you, Russ?
Football season is mostly over for me. The high school season, at least. I had my first free weekend in a while without any high school football to cover. So I just spent the weekend chilling. I'm going to be traveling quite a bit over these next several weekends. So just wanted a nice little chill, relaxing weekend before we fully transition here into some of the winter sports that are going on. Obviously, basketball, wrestling, and a couple other things are going to be going on here. So some fun times ahead there, but we have a lot of TCU stuff to discuss tonight, so let's waste no time. First of all, this episode, of course, is brought to y'all by our friends at Charlie Hustle Clothing Company. Charlie Hustle, vintage made fresh. Go to charliehustle.com. Use the promo code FROGSOWAR. Get 15% off any TCU items. Basketball season is here. Go get some TCU gear and be sure to bring it out to Schollmeyer Arena to cheer on the Horned Frogs this winter. Promo code FROGSOWAR, or use the promo code 101215 TEN1215 for 15% off any non-sale items online at charliehustle.com. All right, TCU taking on Texas Tech. Thursday night football action in Lubbock. Two teams that coming into this game were desperately seeking a win. Texas Tech coming in at 3-5, TCU coming in at 4-4, and the road struggles did not go away for the Horned Frogs in this game, as two crucial turnovers, along with some other mistakes, having to burn timeouts in inopportune moments, and some poor execution in all three phases, really, as Texas Tech ultimately comes away with the win 35-28. TCU, as I mentioned before, now just 1-4 on the road this season, falling near the bottom of the conference standings and now in serious jeopardy of not making a bowl game with 3 games left in the regular season. If there is any sort of silver lining, it's that two of these last 3 games are at home. TCU will play the Texas Longhorns at home next Saturday. It'll be a night game, 6:30 p.m. on ABC. Another night game for the Frogs. There have been a lot of them this season. After that, you'll have a home game against Baylor and then a road game against Oklahoma to close out the regular season in a very tough environment in Norman. Anthony, I was pretty steamed after this loss on Thursday. I'm a little bit more calm about it now, but you look at some of the stats from this game and you see that TCU outgained Texas Tech by a slim margin, 435 to 428. TCU had the advantage in first downs, 26 to 22. TCU went 10 for 18 on third down. Texas Tech was held to 7 for 19. TCU goes 2 for 2 on fourth down. You would think that the Frogs are going to have the advantage, but the two crucial turnovers were just killers in this game. The interception by Josh Hoover in the first half that led directly to a touchdown drive for the Red Raiders, and then another interception at the very end of the game when the Frogs are desperately trying to come back and tie it, and it effectively sealed the loss for TCU. As you know, the Frogs only had 5 penalties. Texas Tech had 8, including a couple of personal foul calls, and it felt like this was certainly a winnable game, especially after a strong third quarter where TCU scores on a couple of rushing touchdowns. But as we've seen all season, we've talked about differences between the 2022 Frogs and the 2023 Frogs, and how this team has just found different ways to lose games. And we'll get into some of the nuts and bolts of this game here in a little bit, but I think TCU just found another way to lose in this matchup. It was certainly a winnable game, and really one that you absolutely had to have, in my opinion, to try and get to a bowl, because Texas and Oklahoma are both great teams. Baylor, that's a rivalry game. Anything goes there. This was a really bad loss for TCU, coming off of a bye week where Sonny Dykes talked about how the team spent time bonding over the bye week and how they reestablished run blocking and being physical up front. You know, I thought the Frogs were going to come out and really control the line of scrimmage better than they did over their last few games, and it was just the complete opposite of that. I was extremely disappointed with this loss, and it's not going to bode well for the future. Anthony, what are your overall takeaways from this game?
Yeah, really, really tough loss. I think you hit on a lot of it there. It's a box score bingo where you look at a lot of these stats and you ran down a lot of them there that point to, well, something really bad had to have happened for this team to come away looking as bad as it did. And yeah, the 2 interceptions were bad. And the timing of those were particularly bad, but also you have a missed field goal that is the same as a turnover. That's a missed opportunity at points. You're at the 25-yard line, and you come away with nothing on that drive. You allow the team Texas Tech to pick up a 3rd and 21 that turns into a first down because you've already used all your timeouts, and they pick up 20 yards on 3rd down, and then it's 4th and 1 and they're running a play. And for some reason you're running substitutes on and off the field. And all they have to do is snap the ball, and it's too many men on the field. And even though, Johnny Hodges on that play made a nice tackle, and you stopped the 4th down play, it didn't matter because you got the penalty and gave up the first down. It did feel like a lot of the little things continued to just not be there. The little details, stuff like that, where, the setup for that field goal where it's 4th and 2 at the 25-yard line and you call a timeout, and you come out of that timeout and decide to give it to Griffin Kell for the kick there. I understand you're trailing by 3, but it's early in the second quarter, I think. I think that's probably a questionable choice, one that they'd like to have back. Certainly, burning that timeout, and I a lot of felt like the coaching staff across the board, maybe we've harped a lot on the kind of the focus and the players on the field, how against Kansas State it was, the discussion about giving up and laughing and all of that. And it felt like in this one, it was more so the coaches, that it felt like a lot of things were just little details were slipping through. How many times this season have we seen like the Jared Wiley is covered up on a pass play where there's too many men on the line and they go out for a pass and it's an ineligible receiver downfield? Just like that's just basic procedural things that there's no reason that should ever happen, particularly this deep into a season. Um, and those can be drive killers. So yeah, I think that turn of events there where TCU fails to get points on the field goal miss and then allows the third and fourth down conversion there. Um, that's just really tough. I think Texas Tech went for several fourth down conversions. They picked up a couple. The one that they didn't get turned into TCU points. And yeah, the first interception from Hoover was really a killer, where TCU had taken the lead and had an opportunity to kind of not put things away, but lean on Texas Tech a little bit. You maybe it was right before the fourth quarter. You maybe run one play and you turn it to the fourth quarter and you kind of settle things in, and instead you chuck it up there. And I don't know, both of the interceptions had no chance of being completed. And I think there's question of whether somebody was reading a zone in the defense wrong and receivers sat in a zone instead of continuing a route, or ran a wrong route, or just Hoover threw a bad ball. I think you can debate that. I'm not football smart enough to know whose decision was wrong there, but those are bad interceptions. At times, obviously, the final interception ended the game. TCU, for the third time this season, driving to tie or win a football game, and can't get it done. The Colorado game, the West Virginia game, and now this game, where TCU probably should have won all of those games. Those are the drives that last season TCU was able to execute and find a way to get the points. And this season, it's just not there. And obviously, you don't have Max Duggan. You don't have a lot of those players from last year. But still, there's got to be some. It's concerning that TCU is still not able to make that happen.
Yeah, some of those situational scenarios that you mentioned were absolutely inexcusable. As far as TCU in the first half having to burn all three of its timeouts before the 8-minute mark of the second quarter, not to mention you had to burn your third and final timeout just to get your field goal unit out there and set up properly, and then you miss the kick anyway. I mean, those are the kinds of things when I talk about TCU finding ways to lose. That's what we've seen from this team all season. And you mentioned the penalties with players not being properly lined up on the line of scrimmage. That's been happening for most of the year as
All
well.
season.
And then the special teams blunders in this game. I know Sonny Dykes at one point was visibly frustrated with Mark Tomberdahl, the special teams coordinator, on the sideline, but you can yell at your assistants all you want. At the end of the day, this is your football team. And TCU collectively does not execute the little things well and does not pay that extra attention to detail that some of the better teams in the conference and some of the better teams in all of college football do. And, I guess if we can start one place with our analysis of this game, when we look at the offense from TCU and from Texas Tech, coming into this, we talked about on the midweek episode, I felt like whichever team came out and ran the football more effectively was going to win this game. And on the Texas Tech side, you had Taj Brooks, who we knew was going to have a big workload. He finished with 146 yards and one touchdown on 31 carries. Texas Tech collectively had 36 pass plays and 39 rush attempts. So tremendous balance from Texas Tech, and you have to give the Red Raiders credit. Taj Brooks, for the most part, was having a lot of success. I thought at times TCU did a decent job against him, but when you complement that with a highly effective Baron Morton, who was 28 of 36 for 282 yards, 2 touchdown passes, 1 touchdown run on a fourth down play with no turnovers. I mean, that's the best performance that he's had in a game all season, and it might be the best performance that he has in a game, in any game this season. I mean, he was making all of the throws that he needed to make. It wasn't really like he was carving up the TCU secondary with all kinds of complex throws deep down the field. It was a lot of run the ball with Taj Brooks, set yourself up in ideal scenarios, get the ball out quickly on the perimeter, and force the TCU defense to make tackles. And we'll get to the defense in a few minutes and the struggles that TCU had on that end. But Texas Tech came out with a clear game plan and showed tremendous balance offensively. And on the TCU side, Josh Hoover was forced to throw the ball 52 times because you had almost zero running game in this loss. And if I can give some credit where credit's due, one thing that I did like and I think is a genuine positive from this game is that TCU capped off 3 red zone drives with rushing touchdowns. That's something that I really wanted to see in this game. We've talked about the red zone struggles all season. TCU hasn't really run the ball much in the red zone, and they did that in this game. Imani Bailey had 2 rushing touchdowns. Trey Sanders, his only carry of the game was a goal line touchdown run. So I was really happy to see that, to see TCU have more success in that red zone area. But collectively, Bailey finishes with only 57 yards on 19 carries. TCU as a team finished under 3 yards a carry, I believe, in this game. And that's just not good enough. You know, you can't be so one-dimensional offensively. You can't put all the pressure on your freshman quarterback, particularly on the road and when he's making only his 3rd career start. And for what it's worth, I thought Josh Hoover played as well as he could have. I mean, he throws for 353 yards and had some huge completions late in the second half on 3rd down. He was making some things happen. He had a couple throws on some 3rd down plays where he was out there looking like Johnny Football on some of these plays where he was under duress, having to scramble out of the pocket and rolling to his left as a right-handed quarterback, throwing balls 15, 20 yards down the field. He had some impressive throws in this game. But one of our writers, Miles Perry, he mentioned that when you're having to throw the ball as many times as you're having to throw it with a young, inexperienced quarterback, the mistakes are going to start piling up. And we saw the 2 interceptions, and frankly,
It was inevitable. Yeah.
It was inevitable. And there were really 1 or 2 other plays where it really could have been 3 or 4 interceptions. There were a couple that maybe one was called back for a penalty, and then 1 or 2 others where it was just a dropped ball by the defender or a ball just not in the right spot. But, I thought Josh Hoover, he showed toughness at the end of the game. He had a couple really tough runs lower in the shoulder. He shows leadership. I really like what I see from him as just a young, raw player, but it doesn't help when you just can't run the football. And that's, from this game, that's what I was most disappointed in, was that I thought TCU, again, coming out of the bye week, you should be well rested. You talked about being more physical up front, run blocking better, and you come out and average under 3 yards a carry. That's where TCU's offense failed in this game. As Texas Tech came out, they ran the football far more effectively than TCU, and they controlled the clock, and that was a big reason why they were able to win this game.
Yeah, for the offense, the one other positive I'll note, because it's been something we've kind of harped on all season also, is all these pass attempts, 52 pass attempts, 0 sacks allowed. So yeah, Hoover did have to do a little bit of running around back there, and he got hit a few times. He took 1 late hit. But 0 sacks, at least you're giving Hoover a chance to make the throw, to get something done. So maybe that being physical, maybe that improvement on the offensive line through the bye week came only in pass protection and not in the run game. Because yeah, I mean, for TCU to rush for just 87 yards against Texas Tech is just, that's just not good enough. And that's not, Texas Tech's rush defense has been pretty good this year, pretty middle of the pack nationally. And they are definitely not as good against the pass as they are against the run. But yeah, disappointing performance there. And Hoover did miss a few open ones too. I think there were a
Yeah.
couple that were just overthrown or thrown a little bit out of bounds. Uh, that it's just like it's pretty close. Like you feel like Hoover is, he might be in that, I don't know, 2020 Max Duggan area of like, okay, we think there's something here, but there's enough mistakes that it's really frustrating.
Mhm.
And it's hurting the team right now. So, we'll see what he comes out with going forward, but the offense, for them to lead in all of these statistical categories against Texas Tech and not come away with enough points here, it's another empty calories. And this is obviously a theme of what this offense does, is it produces yards, but here we are all these games into the season and it can't produce sufficient amount of points.
And I guess one last note about the offense before we transition is that Josh Hoover in 3 starts has had to throw 153 passes. That's an average of 51 pass attempts per game. If the Tampa Bay Buccaneers can't win games with Tom Brady, the GOAT, throwing 40 to 50 to 55 times a game, if anyone watched the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last season, how they struggled offensively despite having the greatest quarterback ever throw that many times, you can't be that one dimensional. And TCU is going to have to get this run game going again at some point. Otherwise, if TCU comes out over these next 3 games and runs the ball the way that they ran the ball against Texas Tech, they're not going to have any chance against any of these teams. That's the last thing I'll say about the offense. And then defensively, 25 missed tackles for TCU against Texas Tech. And not only is that a new season high, but it felt like the Colorado game in that you watch that Colorado game, and as well as Shedeur Sanders played and as well as that offense looked, it, it wasn't like the Buffaloes were doing anything special. It's not like Shedeur Sanders was making ridiculous 20, 30-yard throws. It was a lot of quick passing game, a lot of just get the ball out to your skill players and put them in one-on-one scenarios, put them in space where the challenge is to force the defense just to make tackles. And this game felt very similar. Baron Morton was making a lot of quick passes to the sideline, a lot of short throws where Tech players were just making TCU guys miss. And it was nice to see Johnny Hodges back out there. You could tell that he was battling, he was playing hard, having to deal with that cast on his injured wrist. And unfortunately, I think if he's healthy, he makes some of those tackles, but he had, a few missed tackles in this game, and several other players were struggling to make tackles in space. And to put it in context, Texas Tech had 78 total plays on offense, and TCU had 25 missed tackles. That means on average, you had a missed tackle in 32% of Tech's offensive plays. That's 1 in 3. 1 out of every 3 plays on average, TCU had a missed tackle. That's on the players, but it's also on the coaching too. I mean, this has been an issue all season for the Frogs. Against Kansas State, TCU had 19 missed tackles. Against Colorado, 19 missed tackles. When the same issue pops up over and over again, the coaches are going to have to wear that to some degree. And, we've talked about opposing quarterbacks struggling against this TCU secondary. TCU secondary has done a great job most of the season in forcing incomplete passes, not generating too many turnovers, but just showing great coverage and forcing opposing quarterbacks to just throw the ball away or tuck it and run. But Baron Morton was about as efficient can be in this game. He completes about 78% of his passes. And when TCU can't stop the run and they're still giving up chunks of yards in the passing game, not to mention the defensive line, again, failed to really generate much pressure. I think Nnamdi Obiizor got home on a big sack, but that was really it as far as TCU generating pressure. Morton had a lot of time to make these throws. And in this game, more often than not, he was able to find the open player to extend the drive. So defensively, I think this was right up there with the Kansas State game as one of the worst overall performances. And if fans weren't upset about the defense and Joe Gillespie coming into this game, they certainly will be now. And I didn't see too many positives from the defense in this game. And well, we'll see what happens moving forward. But this was not a good performance from the TCU defense.
Yeah, I'll give a couple positives because it was mostly negative. But um, one thing that has consistently plagued TCU is the ability to cover running backs out of the backfield. And at least Taj Brooks had 4 receptions for -4 yards.
Mhm.
So the plays that went to Brooks were not the backbreakers that we've seen DJ Giddens or Dylan Edwards for Colorado, or that have gone for touchdowns. So at least that piece was fixed. Um so that's good. 8 tackles for loss on this game as well. I mean, part of that is they're just running the ball so many times. You might get a few of,
Yeah.
those 1 yard losses. Um, but that was obviously countered by enough times with big gains from Brooks. Uh, the one play that felt like a killer was Brooks breaking off where he looks like he's bottled up near the line of scrimmage. There's a big clump of people there, and he just kind of bounces out of that mess and picks up a big gain and a first down. And that felt like a momentum changer. But yeah, the missed tackles in this game were pretty brutal. It was great to have Johnny Hodges back on the field. I think his energy was pretty evident. Those fourth down stops, even the one that he got that didn't count as a stop, but his play at the line of scrimmage is up a level, even if he's playing with one hand. The club hand definitely had him not grasping for air, but I guess swatting his hands at air a couple times where maybe he does make those tackles, like you say. But um, more often it was the catch and missed tackle that was the killer, where this Coy Eakin guy, the receiver for
Mhm.
Texas Tech, had an incredible day. He targeted 8 times, 8 receptions. He was able to enough times just wiggle out of a tackle or get enough away from a tackle to pick up a first down. Morton was hitting him like right at the sticks every third down play. It seemed like he was the go-to target every third down, and every time he was catching it. Maybe once or twice it was just short of the sticks, but he had a huge game. But across the board, I mean, the missed tackles in the secondary it's just brutal. I mean, this is a secondary that we have expected big things from, and they've mostly delivered in coverage, I think,
Mhm.
throughout the season. This game notwithstanding, because, yeah, Morton hit 78% of his passes, but uh, the missed tackles here really turned what uh, could have been like a ho-hum day into a pretty big day for Baron Morton. And there was probably a coverage bust. His big touchdown that I guess late in the game, was that the game-winning touchdown? I don't know. Maybe it was his last touchdown. The long pass, um, receiver just gets loose and is left kind of standing wide open across the middle of the field deep. But other than that, yeah, it was a lot of, he just found the guy that was open, and that guy made somebody miss. And you do that enough times and you're getting yourself down the field. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's a whole lot of takeaways from this defense other than uh there wasn't a whole lot of takeaways. There was no interception. I think there was a dropped interception. And I don't know. I just think it still feels a little lackluster. There's not that fire out there. These guys aren't. It's just not. It's not happening. And you would like to think that even holding Texas Tech to 35 points, that you find enough to score and you're okay. I think this TCU offense again put its defense in a couple of bad positions with bad fields and special teams as well. I think there was a punt return that was a painful for TCU. So just I've been I feel like I've been a little bit nice about this defense and about the defensive scheme and um supporting the Joe Gillespie plan a little more than others and maybe than I should be, because what's going to happen is if this team misses a bowl game, there's simply no way the coaching staff in full can return.
Mhm.
And I think the first finger to point will be to Gillespie. Um, and that's where I don't think it will be on the offensive side of the ball, because it is a first season and this was where Sonny Dykes decided to hang his hat. And I think he's going to continue to ride that. And I guess we'll just see how that shakes out. But I think that um, it could be Joe Gillespie might not have a whole lot more time as the TCU defensive coordinator. Things continue in this manner.
And I guess one last note from me about the TCU defense compared to last season is that in many ways this defense is similar to what we saw from last year's defense, but last year TCU found ways to create turnovers. That's not something we've really talked about a whole lot this year, but the ability to generate interceptions in the secondary with Trey Tomlinson and D Winters getting to the quarterback for big sacks, and the TCU defense being able to force fumbles, the guys in the front six being able to generate some turnovers there. That's been missing from this TCU defense basically all season. I'm trying to think. Bud Clark. I know he has a few interceptions. I think Josh
The
has.
Avery Helm cornerback blitz against BYU that got a fumble, I think there. Yeah,
Right.
it's very few.
We haven't seen enough of those plays this year, and when you're kind of a bend but don't break defense, you need those big turnovers to flip the script. And it probably hasn't helped that the offense is just not on the level that it was last year, but there's no denying that this TCU defense has not been able to generate those same kind of turnovers as they were able to last year. And maybe you just chalk that up to we don't have the talent that we did last year, or maybe it's not an emphasis this year. I don't know, but regardless of what it is, TCU just hasn't been able to make those big plays on the defensive side. And then you mentioned special teams. I mean, TCU gives up the huge punt return, and Griffin Kell just hasn't had it this year. I mean, he misses the 43-yard kick, and he falls to 11 for 18 on field goal attempts this year. I think that's about 62%, which is a significant step back from where he was last year as an all Big 12 kicker, hitting about 90% of his kicks. And,
Yeah,
you know, I,
I'll say this on Kel just before moving off of that.
Mhm.
I'm trying to pull up his stats here now, but I looked at it earlier, and his misses, yes, he's missed 7 kicks, I think, on the season, but all of those are from 40 or longer. So this offense is setting him up to take those long kicks. He's made a few from that range,
Mhm.
but oh, where are we? When you're forcing that distance from your place kicker, it's just you're not going to have the same level of percentage. He's perfect inside of 40 yards.
Mhm.
So yes, Kell has fallen off, but he's fallen off partially because he's been pushed off.
Mhm. And I guess as we look into our next game here against Texas, we won't go too deep into this because we have our midweek episode coming up here in a few days, and we'll preview the Texas game there. But some of the post game conference, press conference comments from this Tech loss, Mark Perry mentioned that we need leadership. That was a quote that he gave after this game, and Sonny Dykes had a very interesting slash kind of bizarre quote that he gave after the game. Stephen Johnson with the Star Telegram asked him about the defense and what they can do to improve there. And Sonny Dykes said something along the lines of, we need to get our best players to play well because for whatever reason, they're not playing well right now. Kind of paraphrasing there a little bit, but the it was an interesting comment. I don't know if maybe they're genuinely trying to figure out as a staff why the players are not succeeding, or I'd like to believe he's not throwing his players or his defensive coordinator under the bus there, but TCU social media had an interesting reaction to those comments, and I guess we can use that as our nucleus for this final question. Moving forward, Anthony, what did you take from that? And just, I guess, moving forward, what do we need to see from this team over these last 3 games, but starting with this Texas game?
What I would like to see from these 3 games is 3 wins. That's what I would like to see. I have some faith that TCU will figure out some way to win one of these games that it shouldn't and still also take down Baylor. There's no real reason for that other than just that's what I would like to see. But what do we need to see? I think it's hard in this like transfer portal era where it's like who on this team is going to be on next year's team,
Mm-hmm.
because right now we might be looking past to like who is are we going to have a successful season? No. Are we going to even have a bowl season? It's looking like no. So it's, are you auditioning for your job as a TCU Horned Frog, or are you auditioning for your job as, I don't know, a member of the North Texas Mean Green? Um, how many of these players are going to be back? And I think that you would like to see these guys show, and it's in the leadership piece that everybody seems to, the players, the coaches, people continue to talk about. It feels like there's nobody that they're rallying around to say, let's go fight for TCU. Let's go do this for TCU. The way last season Max Duggan, who I think it's pretty clear is kind of like a one of a kind generational type leader on the field, where he clearly was going to put it all on the field for the Horned Frogs.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone come out in these final 3 games and show that they're going to put it all out on the field? Are they going to really, blood, sweat, and tears type things? I think Max Duggan absolutely showed all of that. Will anyone on this team, and many of these players, obviously from last season, have shown that in the past. I think that's where I would like to see the come out and show that it means something to you to go out there, to put on that uniform and go into Amon G. Carter Stadium and go take down Texas, go take down Baylor. That would be, I think, take some pride in it. And I continue to believe that this team is capable of doing that. And I think they showed a little bit of that in this Texas Tech game, just in that there were plenty of opportunities to have just fully folded, to have completely given up. You're down 14 with 10 minutes to play, and you still come back and have a chance to tie it or win at the end. You're down, you're getting crushed early in this game. I mean, absolutely unsuccessful at everything you're doing early in the first half, throughout the first half, and you still come back and you're still fighting. Will you show that in these final three games? That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, there's no better opportunity to show that than with a win over Texas and an opportunity to potentially crush any college football playoff hopes or Big 12 title game hopes. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I agree 100% about what Max Duggan brought to the program, not just in terms of his talent, but his leadership was so evident. And he almost became Mr. Horned Frog last year. The way he doubled as a ambassador to the university and he became a symbol for the football program. And right now, I don't really see anybody on this team who has those, or at least from what I've seen, I just haven't seen it from anybody. And maybe it's Josh Hoover. Maybe Josh Hoover comes out and has a grand welcoming party and starts to show some of those characteristics with a big game against Texas. Who knows? But we definitely need to see something along those lines over the last three games. And so, with that, we'll go ahead and close out our recap discussion and move into our Big 12 results from over the weekend. Quite a few big games here as we had multiple overtime games. We had several one-score games. And as we look through the results here, beginning with Kansas State and Texas, this was an awesome game. Goes to overtime. Kansas State looked like they were dead in the water. They rally back, nearly take this one, but in overtime, a fourth down pass falls short, incomplete. Texas is able to survive 33-30, the final score there, a game with serious Big 12 title game implications. And then you have the Bedlam game, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. This was also an awesome game. And the Cowboys get the last laugh, winning in Stillwater 27-24. A crucial turnover by Dylan Gabriel late in this game did not help the Sooners at all. And now Oklahoma on a 2-game losing streak after falling against Kansas. You have to believe Oklahoma's playoff hopes are dashed and their Big 12 title game hopes may be dashed as well. So Oklahoma State just continuing to rally off wins after it looked like they might be dead in the water after losing to South Alabama, but a revival of the season. And now the Cowboys might be looking at a Big 12 title game appearance. So a huge win there for Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy there in Stillwater. Houston also picks up an overtime win against Baylor. It looked like Baylor was on track to win this one, but Houston is able to force overtime. They score a touchdown, and then Donovan Smith does it himself, runs in the 2-point conversion. Cougars win on the road 25-24. A battle of winless teams in the Big 12, UCF taking on Cincinnati. This was another close game. A late charge from the Bearcats was not enough as the Knights held on to win 28-26 to get a conference win. Kansas and Iowa State, another great game, a one-score game. Jayhawks coming away with a 28-21 victory on the road, building off a huge win over Oklahoma. And then the only real blowout / non-competitive game from the weekend, BYU at West Virginia. Garrett Green putting together a really good performance for the Mountaineers as West Virginia wins 37-7. So some huge results from the Big 12 games this weekend as we begin to see a clearer picture of the contenders for Big 12 title game spots. It's going to be a really exciting last few weeks of the season here as there are still several teams in the race, but Oklahoma going down again, Texas surviving against Kansas State. Anthony, what are your thoughts from this weekend in the Big 12 and just how things are shaping up now after this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the two huge games ended up delivered every bit of drama and everything. But I think the result that I think has the most impact for the future of the Big 12 is Baylor's loss to Houston at home. And in front of like a half filled McLean Stadium.
Stadium was
Eh,
empty.
Like it's incredible to see just a couple years removed from winning the Big 12. Dave Aranda is on his way out. But I mean, this might already, the nail may already be in the coffin, and they're just waiting to lower it into the ground. It's hard to believe how far that has fallen, and it's a cautionary tale of, hey, Sonny Dykes, we got to turn this thing around,
Yeah.
because we could be sitting here in 2-3 years, a few years removed from, winning the Fiesta Bowl and going to the national championship. And if it turns really nasty, it can turn in a hurry. So that's Baylor's having a really bad season. They obviously still have a chance to turn it around with a win against TCU. That would, at least make everybody feel warm and fuzzy. But really, really terrible season for the Bears in Waco. And I guess excited for UCF and Cincinnati that somebody finally got a conference win in that old American rivalry. Good for them. And to the two big games, I mean, I, Kansas State going for it on, to go get the win. I can't hate on it too much. I think it's probably the right thing to do. You're eventually, the only thing I would say is, are you really concerned that Texas is going to score a touchdown at some point? Because the last few possessions, the Kansas State defense had pretty much stopped everything Texas was doing. The Malik Murphy thing wasn't working. The running game had shut down. The Kansas State defense had started working there at the very end of the game, and obviously in overtime. So, I think that you maybe at least kick one field goal and then see if you can do it the next time around. But I don't think you can hate on that too much. And then the Oklahoma State, it's just too delicious for them to get that walk-off win or walk away from the conference win, kick Oklahoma out the door, playing the Taylor Swift, never ever getting back together. All of the Oklahoma kind of shoving it in Oklahoma State's face all throughout this process of leaving to the SEC, all their little brother talk, all of that nonsense for the Cowboys to go and take that is just huge. And I really hope that we get to experience something similar in Amon G. Carter Stadium next week with the Longhorns in town.
And a lot of Oklahoma fans were very quick on social media to pull out the all-time win-loss record against the Cowboys. But
it's a forever scoreboard.
How it works in college football is whichever team won the game last is the best team in the state. Them's the rules, as they say. So a huge win for Oklahoma State, and a team that it's just kind of hard to believe that Oklahoma State, from the start of the season to now, could be a Big 12 title game contender. So much more to come from the Big 12. And if y'all want to know what's going on in Big 12 football, be sure to go online and follow us at frogsofwar.com. Austin McGee, our writer, does a tremendous job of recapping all of the weekly action in the Big 12 conference. So please go to frogsofwar.com and check that out. I think that will do it for all of our football talk this evening. We still have quite a few items to hit on, and we will transition right into basketball. Yes, basketball season is officially here. Both the men and the women will be officially tipping off the 23-24 seasons tomorrow at Schollmeyer Arena. Women's team will be taking on Oral Roberts at 4 p.m., and then the men's team will be taking the floor against Southern. That'll be an 8 p.m. tip-off. We talked on the last episode about the exhibition game that the men's team played against Texas Wesleyan. Everybody got in on the action. Emmanuel Miller had 24 points to lead the way. A lot of solid individual performances there, but it's an exhibition against a very small program. And now we're getting into the real thing here with the non-conference slate starting up. And I'm very excited for this basketball season. Maybe I'm a little more excited than I would be because the football season has not gone the way we thought it would, but there's so much to like about both of these programs. You look at the women's program with Mark Campbell coming over from Sacramento State. We've talked about all of the players that he has brought in. Madison Connor from Arizona, Sedona Prince, the big forward from Oregon, Agnes Emma Anopu from Stanford, Jaden Owens from Baylor, Sydney Harris, who was the MAC Freshman of the Year last season at Central Michigan, along with some of the players that are back from last season. And for the men's team, very similar story with some new players coming in through the portal that are going to be having a big impact. And Trey Tennyson, the guard from Corpus Christi, Jameer Nelson from coming in from Delaware, Ernest Uday from Kansas, among others. And I'm really excited. I'm going to try and watch as much of this as I can tomorrow when I'm not working. But uh, Anthony, what are your thoughts on just getting this basketball season started, and just what are your early expectations for these two teams as we get into the early non-conference part of the schedules here?
Yeah, man. I'm excited for both of these teams. I think it's going to be electric atmospheres in Schollmeyer. It's going to be terrific basketball in Schollmeyer, both men and women. So I'm pumped to follow it all. I'm looking forward to everything that's coming this season for both of these programs. I think there will be continued spotlight on the women's program as Sedona Prince and her participation in the as the class representative for women's basketball athletes in the class action, I don't know, lawsuit pursuit against the NCAA. I think that will have some bit of spotlight on her and on the program. I think that'll be interesting. There's a lot of intrigue, at least in that, but on the court, man, I think they've brought in a top level coaching staff and a top level amount of talent that TCU should be able to step right in and have at least a lot of fun and a lot of success in levels of success that we haven't really seen TCU women's basketball reach in the recent past. And then on the men's side, I'm not sure how much we learned from the exhibition. Not sure how much we should take away from this game against Southern. Let's see. Southern is Ken Palm number 328. So one of the I don't know, one of the worst, expected to be one of the worst programs in Division One basketball. So we'll see. But would be nice for TCU to go out there and put on a show. I think that this team we've talked about it before, but is built it's built as a team. It feels like this has a transfer class that is not just a collection of dudes. I think all the pieces fit really well, and I think Jamie Dixon has built himself quite a program. And despite losing two superstars off last season's team, and Damian Ball and Mike Miles Jr., that this team can reach even further heights, and be that team that breaks the glass ceiling into the Sweet 16 and beyond in March Madness.
And I'm excited to have more basketball content on the podcast as well. And with this couple of games tipping off here tomorrow, of course, we will be recapping the action in our midweek episode when we preview the Texas football game. So going to be some exciting content coming your way here on Frogs Up, and also online at frogsaward.com. Liz Marquez, one of our new writers, has done a phenomenal job covering football and men's basketball, and soon women's basketball. So looking forward to putting out some more quality content there, and excited to get these two seasons tipped off. And so exciting times ahead there for the men's and women's teams. And a couple other TCU news items here to hit on before we transition out for the night. A shout out to Analia Camille and Haley Hamlet on the TCU Beach volleyball team. They're competing in their fall season right now. The AVCA Pairs National Championships, the two girls went 8-0 in the tournament and brought home gold medals as champions. So congratulations to the two of them. beach volleyball, of course, had a phenomenal 2022-23 season, finishing near the top of the national championship field. So another strong season expected to come for the beach volleyball team. Also, TCU men's tennis is closing out its fall season at the ITA Fall National Championships. TCU sent 5 players out there, and the team collectively did really, really well. I want to say TCU won collectively its first 9 matches of the entire tournament. Jack Pennington made it all the way to the finals, was a national runner-up in the singles bracket. Pedro Vivas, who's had 7 wins over top 40 players in college, was a quarterfinalist in this tournament. And then in doubles, Pedro Vivas and Sebastian Gorsny made it all the way to the semifinals. And then Duncan Chan and Louis Maxted made it to the quarterfinals in doubles. So a very successful fall nationals for the TCU men's tennis team, which should come back into the spring semester as one of the top teams in the conference and in the country. So shout out to the men's tennis team there as well. And TCU soccer should await its postseason fate tomorrow. The NCAA tournament selection show will be held tomorrow, and we will see if TCU soccer makes it into the field. Anthony, I know we talked about this on our last episode. The early exit from the Big 12 tournament did not do the Frogs any favors, but with the selection show coming up tomorrow, does TCU have any chance of getting into the field as an at-large team?
It's very much on the bubble. I'm feeling less confident about it here the day before the selection show than I was our last time we talked. Just the more numbers that come out on RPI and KPI and the people who cover this stuff, it's looking not so good. I think the only thing TCU soccer really has in its favor right now is that it's had a lot of success recently in the national tournament and has been a consistent national player for many years now. So maybe TCU holds that bit of history in its pocket, and that sways the selection committee as it decides who gets these final spots. But yeah, definitely sitting on the bubble and should make for a pretty nervous selection show day on Monday.
And our last item here that we will hit on before we close out, the TCU volleyball team had a set of home matches against Iowa State, a very exciting 5-set match on Friday that unfortunately did not go TCU's way. TCU had a 2-1 set lead in that match. Iowa State was able to come back and take the 4th set and then take the 5th set by 2 points to hand the Frogs a 3-2 loss, and then just a really flat performance on Saturday, a 3-0 sweep by Iowa State. And so the volleyball team struggling a bit right now. Riley Buckley, the starting setter, did not play in either of these matches. They did get Melanie Parra back, the very talented outside hitter. She had 19 kills to lead the offense in that match on Friday. But collectively now it's 6 losses in 7 games for TCU volleyball, who is now 13-12 overall, 6-8 in the conference with only 5 regular season games remaining. TCU will travel to Baylor, who is ranked in the top 25 right now, for 2 matches later this week. And then TCU still has to play Houston as well as BYU, who are both very talented as well. BYU in the top 15 in the poll. Some opportunities there to gain some ground in the conference and also try to improve that resume for a run at an at-large berth in the NCAA tournament. But right now it's looking pretty dicey. You got to get Riley Buckley back, and you really have to. I think you got to go 4-1 or 5-0 over these last 5 matches, and then you're going to have to win a couple matches in the Big 12 tournament to put yourself in a good position to be an at-large team. Otherwise, it's looking pretty dicey. TCU was top 40 in RPI prior to the Iowa State series, and losing 2 matches to a team that was ranked 52 in RPI is not ideal. So hopefully the Frogs can get healthy and turn things around. Still plenty of matches to play, but time is starting to run a little bit short here. So we'll see if TCU volleyball can turn it around over this next week or so. I think that will do it for our episode this evening. Anthony, any final thoughts here before we go ahead and transition out?
No, just I did, like I said, I got to go to the TCU volleyball match on Saturday. Unfortunately, it was a pretty bad loss, but I've said on here before that's one of my blind spots, maybe my only blind spot with the TCU athletics, and so I was just excited to get a chance to go to one of those matches. My kids have been like really into it when we watch them on TV, and so bringing them out to a game, it was a super exciting atmosphere, and certainly encourage. Tickets are pretty cheap. It's easy to get to. Parking's great, and they TCU really still like rolls out the red carpet for the game. I mean, it's treated like a big time sporting event, which it certainly is, and so it's a big fun time. So all of the TCU fans out there listening to this, get yourselves out to a TCU volleyball match. It's a really fun time, and I think there's still a few more home matches left on the season. So yeah, make your way out there. That's all I've got.
And on that note, we will go ahead and wrap it up for the evening. We appreciate everybody for listening in and continuing to follow us here on the Frogs Up TCU Sports Podcast, and all the support online and on social media as well at frogsawar.com, Facebook and Twitter at frogsawar. Continue to follow us and support us there. We have content coming out on a daily basis. We will have our midweek episode here coming out in a few days. We will preview the Texas game for football. We will recap the men's and women's basketball action, and we will continue to hit on some of the other TCU athletic programs as they continue to wrap up the fall seasons here and transition into the winter. And so with that, we will go ahead and sign off for the evening. I'm Russ Hodges. That is Anthony North, and we will sign off with a Frogs Up.
Frogs up.